Okay, so hello everybody. I'm Beatriz. I work at ICATALIST, which is a consultancy company in Spain, and we are part of the NIAT project, which is well, I'm going to talk about now we shift from the business case, which is when we try to put all the numbers to attract the investors, to the business model. So when you are a company and you want to implement this kind of solutions, or you are a government and you want to implement this kind of solutions, which elements you need to actually get there and be able to do it. So for those who don't know NIAT is a project funded by the European Union, which is focusing on the risk reduction potential or value that nature-based solutions can have. So our cases, which are 9 all across Europe, are focused on risk disasters like floods and droughts mainly, so water related, and how nature-based solutions can help mitigate these costs or these risks or reduce them, and thus save costs of damage, and then solve this problem and provide some additional benefits, as all nature-based solutions do. So in this project, we have we have defined, let's say, that the value of MBS when you applied it in this kind of settings is first you have first a main function, which will be this risk reduction function. And the main value for that would be the reduced, economic value would be the reduced damages from extreme weather events, and thus the damage costs avoided because of this solution. And that's what we call the assurance value of MBS, so the capacity that they have to reduce the exposure to the risks during an extreme event, and thus reduce the impacts and cost report. And then you will have, as with all nature-based solutions, some secondary values that are all these co-benefits provided by the measures. That can be environmental benefits, can be social benefits, and can be economic benefits because of other aspects. So how would you capture these values, and then show them to the possible investors to show that your MBS will be effective, will be worth investing, and how can you also turn these values into revenues for your company or your organization? What we have done is we have built on the economic valuation framework that NIAT has developed, which is very similar to what the previous presenter has already shown as a basis. And then we identify the ways to capture these values, these numbers, and turn them into a business that provides means for funding of the MBS, which in many cases, especially when they are promoted by governments or public institutions, they are not aimed to really make money, but just to solve a problem. So in those cases, maybe you are not so interested in the revenues, unless you want to use them for funding, but on the funding sources that you can get. And also the value to generate economic activity around the MBS. In this case, could be to promote other businesses around the area that can really make some revenues out of it. And then we also, it is somehow linked to building the business case for bankable projects that attract investors, because once you identify which sources of funding you can get, or not only sources but also agents that could be interested in funding it, then you need to build your business case and give them the reason why they should fund these possible solutions. So this economic valuation framework of NIAT is divided into, let's say, 4 aspects. It takes into account, it's somehow a cost-benefit analysis, as the previous presenter also mentioned, which is where your cost would be your life cycle cost, so all the cost of implementation, maintenance, and so on. And then your opportunity costs. So how much money I am not making because I'm not going for this alternative option that can be a gray option and hybrid option or whatever. So if I'm not doing this marsh or whatever and I'm doing my green forest, what this other option would have provided. And then the co-benefits. The life cycle cost and opportunity cost would be on the cost side. Then on your benefit side would be your avoided damages. So the damages that don't happen and thus there are avoided costs there. And your co-benefits. So all these additional values that you are creating. What you can find a description of this framework in the work done by Grabline and Lecohen. It's now under publication, but it's also in NIA deliverables 4.4 and 6.3 if you want to check more in detail. So then what we are trying to look at in our, well, in the, let's say in NIA is to how to attract or build business models around the MBS. So how the private companies or the implementers can implement, can find all the elements to turn this value and to make this value bankable and make it effective, because you get all the funding, you get all the partners, and the activities that you need to do. So for those that may not be so familiar with the business model concept, it's defined as the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value in economic, social, cultural, or other contexts. To try to, let's say, structure all this, what we have done in IAT is to develop what we call the NAS canvas, which is, you may know about the business canvas. It's just a table with different elements that helps you identify all the elements you need for your business. What we made is to enhance this table and tailor it for the case of nature-based solutions, because these kind of solutions have the particularity that have a very strong, many times very strong public component, in the sense that public authorities are many times involved in their implementation, and as such, these nature-based solutions become somehow a public good, and then you get all these kind of problems of who owns it, who pays for it, because it's when something is considered public or it has the ownership of everybody, then also nobody gets responsibility for it. So there are these particular aspects that the nature-based solutions have as compared to a gray solution. And also the issue of the co-benefits. A gray solution usually doesn't provide co-benefits, whereas these nature-based solutions do. So what we did is to expand this canvas to turn it into what we call the NAS, the Natural Assurance Scheme Canvas, which I will present right now. And this is the tool we have been using in NIA to try to describe the business model for different solutions. What we are going to do now is I'm going to show you the canvas. I'm going to explain how it works, how you would use it to identify for a certain nature-based solution all these elements to build the business model. Then I will show you some examples of how we have applied it to the NIA demos. I had 4 described, but depending on how I'm doing with the time, I will do 3 or 4 explanations, because what I want to do at the end is that to show it again, and that you try to apply it to an example that you think of. If you, for example, I have heard from some of the people that they are thinking about starting a company and they want to do nature-based solution interventions. So then you can think of this ideal company you have, and then try to fill this mass canvas to see, okay, what would I need to actually build this company and make these solutions, what kind of elements I need. So this is well, I will just start now. This is the canvas. I hope you can see, because I know the letters, the font is not very big, but well, hopefully you can see it. So the way it's structured, before going through the elements, is you have first your flow and value flow of services, so the services that you are providing through the MBS, and the value that you are creating through this MBS in in our case, it's an assurance service, but it doesn't need to be. This can be also applied when you're, let's say, the risk reduction is not your main goal, but it's, you have another one like clean water or something like that, another kind of main objective. But the thing is that you have your main objective, and then you will have some common. This will be the beginning of the canvas.
Can you please take the mic and keep it in your hand, because every time you turn your head to the... Yes, thank you.
Much better, right?
Yes.
Well, then the second step, you go to this left side, and you have all the supply side of the service. So you will have who implements the service, the activities that are implemented, the services that are provided, and then your cost structure at the end. Then you move to the right side where you will have the demand, because we wanted to have like kind of a market setup, so that's why we put the let's say, supply on one side and the demand on the side, and the flow center, the service flow at the center. And you will have here who owns the problem, or who is affected by the problem, who are your customers or clients, and what are your revenues and your funding streams. And finally, which is very important, what is the impact of your measure? Because at the end you need to have some kind of measure of what impact you are going to generate. So then the different steps is first, you define the problems that you are going to be addressing. So for example, in our case would be risk reduction of floods, for example. Then on the second step you have the value proposition, which is what is the value you are providing. You can have a primary value, which is the one you are looking for. So if depending on your main objective of your measure, the result will be your main value. In this example of well, maybe it's easier to just go through one of the examples, and then I will save some time, because then we can see it applied directly to an example. So for example, the first demo in the NIAD, or one of the demos in the NIAD project, is manage aquifer recharge in Medina del Campo region. So Medina del Campo region is at the center of Spain, in Castilla y León, and it's a very dry area. So it's mainly devoted to agriculture, and they mainly use groundwater for agriculture. So in the last years the aquifer has been overexploited, and because of climate change it is expected that the droughts will be becoming more frequent and more acute. And so well, the River Basin Authority has considered to implement an aquifer recharge, but instead of using the traditional artificial infrastructure for artificial aquifer recharge, they are going to use the riverbed. So they are going to do a transfer to put the water into the river, which is usually dry because it's one of these seasonal streams that sometimes has water and sometimes doesn't. So by refilling, let's say, the river and through the natural infiltration, the idea is to somehow recharge to some point the aquifer and improve not only water availability, but also like all the surrounding ecosystems that used to be there in the past, and now because of the disconnection of the river and the aquifer have gone down somehow. So for this example, the problem to be addressed would be the impacts from droughts, the groundwater exploitation, and the degradation of the surface ecosystems. The next step would be the value proposition. The value in this case would be improving the groundwater levels, recovery, which will be a backup resource in case of drought. We will also restore the surface riverine vegetation and the wetlands along this river, which is called the Zapadier River. Then your primary value will be the reduction of the drought impacts of agricultural production and the avoided costs of crop loss. This is where the idea is that here we should try to get numbers. So what you show to your investor or whoever, or you consider yourself, what is your primary value? As much as possible, you need to quantify to really know how much money are we talking about. So if it's damage cost reduction, how much cost can I save? And I don't have them here because this is work in progress. We still don't have the numbers for this example, for most of them. But in the final version, we will have the numbers there. Then the second additional values would be the co-benefits, that in this case you would have the improvement of wetlands and riverine vegetation. For example, surface recovered. We are always looking also for indicators to show a value as well. The employments in agriculture generated, better water management through surface water availability, improvement of water quality, for example, the ratio of water, ratio of aquifer surface water with nitrate and arsenic levels below the threshold, because in that case the main problems with water quality are arsenic and nitrate. Then higher sustainable groundwater availability, and also an important one can be organizational strength and legal protection, because of farmers getting together into water user associations in order to be able also to manage water better, and that's another additional benefit. So once you have looked at your value, then you go to cluster B, which is the regulatory context. So it's important to know if all the required regulations are in place, and which one affect your intervention, and if there is any missing regulation in case of being, for example, a river basin authority, if you need to generate this new regulation that will support the implementation of the measure. When you're a company, then you cannot do much there. But if you're a public institution, you maybe can. Then we move to the supply side. The next step would be who implements the measure. In our case, it would be, for example, the River Basin Authority, and with support of the farmers for some soft measures that were aimed to reduce the water abstractions, but mainly for the aquifer recharge it would be the River Basin Authority. The next step, key activities. Which activities we need to do? In this case is the MBS that we have selected, the Managed Aquifer Recharge in the Zapardiel River area. And sometimes you need some soft measures on the side, because you can consider that maybe your nature-based solution alone is not sufficient, or it won't work unless there are some kind of management or soft measures accompanying. And in our case, that we realized that it was the case, so we included within the measure also the creation of water user associations and a restriction of the groundwater abstractions for farmers. Then, next step, key resources. Which resources you need in order to implement this measure? So you need funds, you need knowledge and information, technical skills and human resources, political support, technological support, environmental impact assessment, political will and cooperation of farmers in this case, and smooth communication. So then you can identify which resources you need to implement your activity. Partners. Who do you need to involve in order to provide these resources, to get the support you need, or just the acceptance of the people involved? In our case, we had some governmental institutions, the construction companies, the environmental consultancies, sometimes the farmer leaders. So all these people that you need to involve, all the stakeholders you need to involve in order to be able to do it. Then the next one is the service provision. So now you need all the, you have all the elements you need on the supply side to provide the solution. And now you identify which services you are really providing. This is very linked to the values. The primary service will be the reduction of impacts from droughts in our case, and the secondary service will be all these co-benefits that I have listed before, like ecosystem service restoration, increased biodiversity, maintenance of wetlands, attractions of rural or green tourism. So you also need to think of, besides, let's say, the direct even direct co-benefits that you see, the classical environmental things like carbon sequestration. Also in social terms, like what social services I am providing, like for example this of possible tourism interest, or better life quality for farmers, or things like that, because that can also give you later on some possible clients that would be interested in putting some money on the table in order to get this benefit. The next one would be, because I had to split the table into 2 slides, so it can be a bit messy, but we are still on the left column. Your cost structure. When you have to quantify and identify your life cycle costs. For that, this Excel sheet that the previous presenter showed was very useful, actually. So you need to get your solutions and quantify your costs, your life cycle cost, your monitoring cost, your maintenance cost, and then come up with the whole cost structure. It was very interesting for me also to hear about the time of the cost. This is something we didn't include here, but it's certainly important when you are going to have your costs. So when you will need to put money or to do the, let's say, the payments, in order to also see when you need to get your revenues or your money intakes. And then your opportunity costs, you can list them there as well. So I go back, and then we go to the demand side. Who owns the problem? Who is affected by the problem? In this case, we have all the water users who are suffering from the groundwater overexploitation, especially farmers, and then also the River Basin Authority, because they are obliged by the Water Framework Directive to solve the problem, to do something. I mean, you have a overexploited aquifer, you need to do something to solve it. And from those affected people, how can we build our customer segments? You will have first maybe direct beneficiaries. For example, in this case, we will have the farmers. They will benefit if there is an aquifer recharge and there is more water available and better ecosystems. The farmers will have more water. The citizens from the local municipalities also, in case of drought, they will have a backup resource. And also the ecosystems, I put them here because they get benefited as well, but of course they won't pay. Then you have your clients. So those are the main beneficiaries, but who are your clients? Who are the ones really paying for the service? In this case, we will have the farmers through taxes, or through taxes or tariffs, they will pay for the MBS, and then all the users that indirectly are paying taxes. These are your clients paying for the solution. And then who are the extended beneficiaries? So those that are getting benefited, but they don't pay. They are indirect. But maybe if you, let's say, sell properly the project, they could be interested in paying because if they perceive their benefits. And this could be, for example, in the case of the risk reduction, insurance companies. So if they see that they could save money in compensations, they could be interested to fund this solution because they will save money in the long term. The tourists, if they want to, I mean, they may be even indirectly paying already with their fees when they visit a certain special area around it, and the government through public funds. Then your revenue streams. In this case, for example, revenue streams for the solution could be the fees paid by tourists to visit the recovered wetlands or for bird watching. So the idea is to get a little bit your co-benefits and see where you can get money from them and how. Or for example, increase agricultural turnovers thanks to greater water security and crop planning. Could also provide increased revenues and then make money. And going back here, we are still on the right column. The funding. How can the measure be funded? Usually there are 4 types of funding mechanisms that you can use. The tariffs, the taxes, the transfers, and the private investments. So tariffs would be, for example, the water tariff is the price you pay, so to say, for using the water. That would be for all water uses in the municipal water supply, or the tariff paid by farmers or whoever for the water. The taxes, we all know what taxes are, what you pay to the government for certain services. This can be an indirect way of paying for things as well. The transfers means external funds provided by big organizations, like for example the government with the public funds can provide some funding, and also grants from for example, the European Union or the World Bank, or these kind of sources of funding can be, we go into this category of transfers. And then the private would be private investors, for example a company or a foundation or whoever that wants to put some money for that. So for example, for this example that we had of the aquifer, this has been funded mainly by, well, indirectly by the farmers paying taxes, but also through European grant. So the Water River Basin Authority has got a LIFE project, and they have money to co-fund the implementation of this measure. And then, well, private funds invested by the farmers to purchase, well, for this is mainly for these soft measures that were implemented on the site, to purchase meters to measure how much water they are using and so on. And then the final cluster, once you have everything set up, would be your impact. So once you have everything done, what is the impact you have got? And usually you define there some key performance indicators. In this case, we tried to find some indicators of efficiency, of environmental performance, of social performance, and well, the economic would be more on the part of the value, which is the avoided damage costs. But here you have all the performance indicators. Again, it's missing the numbers because we didn't get there yet, but it will be quantified at the end. So this is our first example. This was based, well, let's see how much time I have. I would say we don't have much time, so I could go through another example that is based on flooding. This one was about droughts. This one is in the Black River in France about flooding, but then we will have very little time to apply the canvas. So would you prefer to have another example explained, or would you prefer to try to look at the canvas and try to apply it yourself? For example, votes for the first option, example. 2, and application. Well, I see more hands here. So let's. What we can do is any questions about before you try to apply it about the whole framework. I'm going to put the blank one. So any questions about any of the boxes I have explained? No. Okay. So then. I invite you to maybe make small groups or individually. You think about a solution that you have in mind, a case you have come across with, and try to develop your business canvas for this solution. You can read the examples on the presentation later on. Okay, so it's already the time, so I don't want to delay the lunch. So I would say, if those who tried to apply, did you find anything difficult to, or do you have any comments to the canvas? Anything that you don't agree with, or don't understand very well, or something like that? Something you would change? Any comments that you could think of? Nothing? Okay, so well, I invite you to continue this exercise if you want, after the break or whatever. And I will be here today and tomorrow. Any questions I will be happy to answer. And if those who want to start the company want to use it and find it useful, it will be great to hear.
Just one question. When you explain me how you relate the services step 8 to the cost, and then the life cycle cost, and also what the opportunity cost, can you elaborate?
Yes, so the idea is, well, actually the cost is not so much linked to the service, but to the activities. So the activities will be the really measures that you take, and those will be the ones giving you the cost, the life cycle costs. The opportunity cost is just to have, let's say, a complete picture of your real costs, the costs you are kind of avoiding as compared to implementing other type of solutions, when you have on the other side your revenues and your funding needs in a way. So this, for MBS particularly, usually can be useful when presenting this, for example, to an investor, because usually the opportunity cost can be high, in the sense that usually building an nature solution as compared, for example, to a dam or any costly project that is great, the opportunity cost can be high, and then it can be impacting, so to say, like you need this kind of funding, whereas you are saving this amount of money as compared to building this other infrastructure or this other measure. This is the idea. About the service, but I've been thinking about it, and if I should maybe place it just on top of the value, so you have the service and then the value below, better than there. I just put it there because it's on the supply side, so it's you're providing this service, and that's why I put it there. But maybe it's confusing. That could be a comment to be taken into account.
Well, the benefits have the economic value, so that's really what I'm struggling with. How do you get the economic value of the benefits to the cost side, or to the cost side?
Yes, well, because it's supposed to be like the service provision side, so to say, with the cost below, but here it's like, oh, you need to create these services. But that's why I'm thinking, yeah, and after your comment I see it more clear that it should really go on in the center column. Okay, because it would be like you have these services and these values, so the primary and secondary value emerge from these services. So thank you very much.